Okay. Okay. Good morning, good evening, everybody who's here today. I guess we briefly discussed about today's agenda in last meeting, and there was a request about completing this piece about JSON import. And those who remember, maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, we talked about exporting a JSON from Business Central. So we'll spend some time on JSON import, and then there is only one question. So I'll maybe take that first, and then we'll continue about JSON import. Let's go through the normals. Here's the link. The URL has been changed a little bit. So if you're still pointing to the old URL, you can get the link here. It's on the page. There's a separate page now called as #bcopendiscussion. And those who are here and want to be default attendees, they can just drop their name and email address in chat, and then they don't need to register going forward. They'll get the invite every week. Okay, so let's talk about that question first. And that question is from Shahid. And Shahid is not here. And his question is around the customer summary aging report that has currently support 3 fixed period. And can we make it more based on report parameters, say number of periods? Uh, Sahid, to answer your question, yes, you can. The only problem that you may end up happening with this is that you also will have to limit the number of period in your request page to a value, because the values that appear in the customer aging report are also calculated based on the number of periods that you are setting. So the numbers are actually coming from detailed customer ledger entry based on the date filter of that particular array of, where, as you are saying right now, that there are only 3 periods. So only those 3 date arrays are created in the code. So you can surely increase those array count based on a parameter on your request page, but then because it's a hard coding behind the scene about the array indexes, so you'll also have to limit that till what range your array will support, because you'll have to code and loop your logic based on that number of period. So as in, you can say that your number of periods can be 1 to 100 or 1 to 1000, but you'll have to kind of fix that max value that you can go to so that you can loop your code around it. So if you need more help on this, Sahid, maybe next time we can talk about it when you are here. And if others may have the similar issue or want more clarity on it, we might do a quick kind of a report dev on that particular report. So let's move ahead and let's see about the JSON that we talked about. And before we move ahead, let's do a quick recap about what we discussed about the JSON in the last meetings. So if you remember, we talked about there are some syntax rules in a JSON file that is generated. And these are the only rules: that it's a name value pair combination. The name and values are, as in data, is separated via commas. The curly braces are notified as JSON objects, whereas the square brackets are known as JSON arrays. And we will understand what that means by looking into a file. So this will help us while we are trying to import that data in our Business Central, uh, Business Central tenant, while we are reading from a JSON file and then trying to create a record in our Business Central environment. So let me find that file where that is. And this is the same repo which I cloned that we used last time. It's available on the GitHub. Anybody who wants to have a look can always go and see there. But this is the sample file that I've created for today's demo. So I'll just copy this text and we'll use the same website that we used last time to beautify, to make it readable, the JSON data. So when I process this, I'll be able to see that what kind of data it is. So if we see here, this JSON have a set of orders, and those orders can be one or multiple. Like in this case, there are two orders. So if you see here, this square bracket is an array. So that means that there are so the first one is this, which is your JSON object, which starts with a curly brackets. And then inside that, there's a value which have an array, which notified by this sign of square brackets. Inside this array, can be one or multiple orders in this case. So if you see, there are two orders in this array, and then each order is again an object because it's surrounded by these curly brackets. Inside each order, there are some name value combinations, as we can see, and then there is a subarray for lines, which means they are lines of this particular orders. Inside each line array, there will be again some object, which is a line number one object, a line number two object, and a line number three object. And then, just to kind of satisfy what Manish question was on this particular scenario, is inside each line there can be one or more comments. So line number one have two comments, which is again notified with an array, and then inside each array, each comment is an object. Is there any confusion till this point? And this is kind of just a recap of what we talked about last time. Okay. So what we'll try to do is we'll try to import these two orders in our Business Central tenant and understand how that can be done. So we have seen what a JSON object is, what a JSON array is in the actual file. Now we talked about two parameters in JSON last time, which is, let me open my source code here, and let me know if I need to zoom in. If it is smaller, let me zoom in. If you remember, we talked about JSON object, and then we talked about, I guess, let me see, bc JSON, and we talked about JSON array. The two things that we have seen in our slide deck, which is how you kind of export that data. So for exporting that data, you need to format that data into these two, which is an object and then an array. And then inside an array, there can be object and all. But we never talked about JSON token and JSON value, which we'll talk about today because they are required for reading that data back. So let's don't save it. So let's quickly understand what is a JSON token. So it's also a container, and the beauty of JSON container is that it can hold anything. It's any format of JSON data. It can hold a JSON object, it can hold a JSON array, and that makes it unique in the whole JSON import export logic. Now there are some specific functions of a JSON token, the two sets about reading and writing. So you can read something in a JSON token from a string or from an in a stream, and the same goes for the write. You can write it to a text variable or you can write it to an OS stream. In today's scenario or in today's example, we'll talk about reading that because we want to read that JSON file and then process that inside Business Central. The second set of commands is about checking and converting. So when you read it from a stream or from a string, you can convert it to an array or an object or as a value. So let me open my browser again if I can. Okay, where's this browser? So you can convert your JSON token into an array, or into an object which is notified by this, or into an array, or into a value which is a combination of this, which is actually this is the value of that name value pair. So while you are converting this, you also need to check, is it an array or not? And then you can convert it to array. Is it an object? Then you can convert it to object. And in the similar way, is it a value? And then you can convert it to a value. So it's kind of pre-checked before you actually convert that value into the respective JSON supported structure. So now we have understand what a array will look like, how an object will look like. But let's talk about the value, which is the last option that we have in our Business Central AL structure, which is JSON value. Now it's a container which can store a JSON value. But the cool part with the JSON value is that you can convert it to any supported Business Central data type, so that you don't have to do an evaluate. So like when you read it from, like we will be reading it from a text file, it will always come as text, but the JSON value can convert that value into any supported Business Central data types. You can convert it to an integer, to a date time, to a date, to a Boolean, enum, all those options which are available in JSON, so that while writing it back into the database, you don't have to do evaluate every time. And it can also set the content of that JSON value into that structure while you're trying to export it out. So it helps you both ways. So what we'll do today is we'll understand how we can use JSON token and JSON value while we are reading that JSON data from a file and then creating some kind of document in our Business Central. So let's quickly get into our code part. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them before. That's not a problem. So I'll keep this open so that we can read it here and we can see it here. Okay. So what we'll do is let's create a new code unit so that we know what we are doing, which is import from json.codeunit.al. Okay. Let me check what the last number we used, 50,000. Okay. Okay. So we'll use this code unit to kind of read that JSON value. So as we did last time, we'll first create a global procedure that will be then used by our page extension that we already have. So we'll create a procedure which is not local, and it is called as, let's say, import. We'll use the same scenario because I have sample data from purchase order. So now I'm going to import the purchase order from JSON. So the first thing that I'll have to do is I'll have to request that file or read that, ask user where that file is that I actually want to process. So let's create a procedure to get the file from user. Okay. Sorry, I chose the wrong option. Let me create the curly braces so that you can understand it's a function. Okay. Inside this, as we saw in our slide deck, that I can read it from stream or from a text. So to make it simple, we'll just use our upload into stream. kind of select that file into the stream. So select file to import dialog. And my next parameter is from folder, which is not supported. Then it's from filter, which is required. I need to filter all the file or file of type JSON. Then my next parameter is from file, which is not actually used, but it's required. Input file name, declare it locally, input file name of type text. And then the last parameter is in stream. So I need a in stream. Stream. So what will happen with this is that if user selects a file, now I can actually read that data from that in stream to my JSON token, if you remember. So what I'll do is I'll create a JSON token of kind of JSON token. Or let's call it as input token. Okay. I can do my input token dot I can read it from, and then I can read it from two places, either from the string or from the in stream. So what I'll do is I'll read it from my in stream. So this will fill up my input token, which is my JSON token, with the data that is selected by the user. But because I need this value here, because this is my global function, I'll actually change the position of this from here to here so that I can pass that going forward. And then I'll pass that input token to this function as my JSON token. Okay. So, okay, and input token. Let's first quickly check that is this function is able to read my data or not. I can type to a text string. So let's just quickly check that before we move ahead. Text, and let's do a message of out text. Okay, so that will kind of confirm that. So let me add that action here on my purchase order list page. I just copy this download JSON, call it as load JSON. And I'll change the image code. And then this is my import from JSON. And I'll do a import from JSON dot purchase order from JSON. Okay. So yeah, we should be able to test with this that is it actually working the way we expected before we move forward. So once I'm here, I'll do a upload JSON. Here's the file selection dialog that we have written. I'll choose a file, which is this input, and I can actually see the content of it. So till this point, my token have been filled in with the JSON data that is stored in that file. So that's good. Now let's move to our next step. So I didn't needed this. Just did it to verify. Okay. So now once I have the file, I actually want to now import that data into my purchase as a purchase order. So let's call it as import purchase order with my input coming into input token. Now this function is created here. I'll collapse this. This is just for user input. And we'll start defining this. Now, when we are reading a JSON text, which is in my input token, we also need to remember our JSON structure that we'll be getting. So what we'll be getting when we read that file is we'll be getting an object. Inside that particular object, there will be an array, orders array. And remember, the JSON reading and writings are case sensitive. When you're writing them, whatever, if I have this O capital, then it should be O capital while I'm trying to fetch the data into my Business Central tenant. So first I'll get an object. Inside that, I'll get an orders array. So let's try to simulate this into our code that we're writing here. So the first thing that I'll verify that the file that is written, or the JSON token, whatever is written into this JSON token, is it actually an object or not? So I actually have a function in, as we discussed in the slide deck, that this has so many functions, including is object, which verifies that whatever the content of this JSON token is it actually an object or is it an array? So it's kind of a check that I'm doing at this point, that I'm expecting the object first in the file that you have read. So I'm saying that if, and this will return a Boolean, so I can say, like I always like to do, that if it is not an object, then do nothing. And there's nothing else need to be done. But now if it is an object, as we have here, if it is an object, then I need to start going deep into it, which is I need to convert that reading that I have done into an object. So right now it's in token. I have to read it into an object. So when I have to do that, I need a object type, and what type of object I'm creating, and you can name it anything. But if you see, I'm trying to read an order object. So what I'll do is I'll say this as order object, just to keep it simple. So now what I can do is I can say that my order object is fetched from my input token dot as object, because now I have verified that it's an object. So if it's an not an object, it goes out. If it is an object, then it goes into order object. Let's pause for a second and think about it. It's actually orders. That means it can have one or more order inside it. So there can be multiple orders in my orders array. So in that case, what I would like to do is I would like to call it as orders, because there can be multiple orders, and we'll come to the specific order in a minute. So now the whole order object array object is part of this JSON object. Stop me wherever it sounds confusing. It can be confusing at while. Once I have this, all my orders in this object, JSON object, I need to check that is that, because this inside this curly braces, it can be called orders or it can be called as, let's say, lines. or it can be called as comment. I need to match that it is orders. So I'll copy the same in the same syntax that I'm expecting the data in. And I'll say that if my order object contain is there, so if you see the contain requires a key. So if I, let me see here, if I see the IntelliSense here, always hard time with this, but contains needs a key. So my key to check is that the order object should contain a keyword, a key of orders. So if that key exists, that means I'm in good hands. The file that user have selected is the right file. Then what I need to do is then I need to fetch the order number one from that, because there can be multiple orders. So I now need to identify that one order in that. For that, what I can do is I can do my orders object dot get, because now I know that it contains order. So now I can get the whole order set into my, let's see what the get needs. It needs a result token. So it's not a get like in nav that will return you a primary key. The key that you are specifying as the first parameter in the get, if that is found, then the result will be written into a JSON token of type result. So I kind of have to need to give that JSON token, which will be filled in if the get succeeds. So let's create another JSON token here, and we'll call it as order token array. Because as I said, there are multiple uh, orders in that. It needed to be of type token. So let's create that, and we will get that into my order token array. So if the get succeed, because it returns a boolean, so let's kind of do error handling. Then what we need to do, because this array, what this array symbolizes is this bracket. If the array is found, then what I need to do is to do kind of a repeat until for all the orders that I find inside that array. So if you haven't noticed, there is for each. If you haven't used it, try reading about it. It's kind of your repeat until, if you want to call it. So what I'm saying now is that for each order in that array, this array, for each order in that array, do certain steps. So now I'm trying to fetch one order from it. So what I'll do is I'll create this time an order token. This is a JSON token array, and this is one order token. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm saying that for each order token in my order token array, and I'll have to convert it to array as we talked about in the slide, do certain steps, and we'll understand this in a minute. But is it clear that first I check that is it an object or not? If it is an object, I fetch the whole object into a orders object. Then if that order object should contain a key of orders, and if that happens, then I'm trying to fetch that orders array into a array, which is also JSON token. As we talked about, JSON token can hold JSON object, JSON arrays. So I get that orders array and put it into this array. And then for each order in that array, I'm trying to do certain stuff. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to fetch one order. So for that, I'll create, you see here, for each order, there need to be an object. So let's create an object, and this time it will be called as order object because now it's one order. So I'm saying now my order object is coming from my order token as my object. So now I have, at this point, I have this order, this whole order in my JSON order token, which is this. So once I have my order in my token, I can start reading it. So let's start reading it and start inserting that data. So first, what I want to do is I want to kind of fetch the header details, which is my purchase order detail, which is my order date and buy from vendor number. So let's do that. For that, what I'll do is I'll say get purchase header details from my order object and put them into a purchase header, which is so the intention of this function will be to kind of read all the header details and then create that purchase header for my purchase order. So let's create a procedure which we'll use to kind of read the order header into it. And then I want to return this, so I'll kind of create it as var. Okay. And then this is my order object. Now first, let's define those variables that I'll need to create my order. And those are my order date and buy from vendor number. Those need to be temporarily stored somewhere. So I'll say my variables are my order date of type date, and then my vendor number as my code of 20. Okay. So now at this point, I'm actually, if you see here, I'm actually at this level. This is where my cursor is. This is what my order object is pointing to. So now I don't have to do anything. I just have to fetch that value and store that into my variable. So now what I need to do is that if my order object, which is the object get, now we remember what the parameters of get are, is a key and result. So my key in this case is my order date. And remember that it is case sensitive. So if you have in a different format, use that. And then it stores the value into a JSON token. Okay, so I'll create a JSON token as, let's say, value token of type JSON token. This get, what it'll do is it will fetch the value of the order date, which is this, and put this value into my value token. So if this is successful, then what I want to do is I actually want to fill this value in my order date. But if you remember during our slide, we talked about one more thing, which is my value, my JSON value. So let's utilize that, how we use that. So this is my actual, or let's say input value, and we call it as JSON value. What I can do is I can pass my input value and initialize it from my token to the value as value. Remember, we can do as array, which we did here. You can do is that as object, which we did somewhere here. And now we are converting it to value. When I do as value, it converts it to a JSON value. So now this is converted to a JSON value. Now, as I talked about, the best part of the JSON value is that you can do input value dot, and you can convert it to any type of data type that is supported in Business Central, so that you don't have to do your evaluate or other things to kind of convert your data to the actual format. So I can do a order date is equal to, and it's of type date as date. So this value will help me to convert it to date, which then will be stored in my order date. Now nothing else. I just have to follow the same step for my another parameter, which in this case the key is buy from vendor number. So I'll just copy that and I'll keep it here. I can use the same variables. Just here I'll have to change it to vendor number, and the value is not date, it is actually as code. What will happen with this is this will get converted to code and then will be assigned to vendor number. So now I have my vendor number and order date, which is the only information that my JSON is providing. So I can use this info to create my purchase order header. So let's do that, which is my purchase header. Let's do quickly or init my purchase header dot insert to, and then type, and then I can do my insert is done. Once my insert is done, I'll get my number, and then I can do my validate of my buy from vendor number with my vendor number, and then I can do my validate of order date to my order date. I can modify my purchase header. Okay, so let's test this at this point. And because I have multiple orders in this, as you can see here, there are two orders, one for vendor number 10,000 and one for vendor number 40,000. We will have to kind of clear this purchase order so that it doesn't cause problems here. Okay. When I run this, at this point, it should create two purchase orders while reading this file, and should have the vendor number which are in my JSON file. So let's try that. Upload JSON. Let's select the file. And if you see, it created two new orders as of today of the document date, one for vendor number 10,000 and one for vendor number 40,000. And let's go in and let's see what's our order date is. Where is our order? 15/1, and the other one is 16/1. So let's quickly verify that here. This was 15/1 and this one was 16/1. Any questions at this point before we move forward? Because this might get a little bit confusing as we go forward from this. Okay.
Saurabh, I think
Yeah.
maybe you can combine these as value and as date in one only one. This can be done in one step itself.
These two lines.
No, my point is where you have written as value brackets, and next if you write dot as date in that line itself, value
Oh,
token dot as value braces then as date
okay. So
in
you are
one step
saying that
only. I
if
think
I can do something like this.
no, no, no. Uh,
Oh, sorry.
Input value dot as value dot as code.
Oh, okay. Input value as value as well. Oh, sorry, not in. No, I can't do because this is actually the token, right? Which is storing your value as in. So this is the JSON token.
Yeah, yeah.
So and this is JSON value.
So what I'm saying is, if you can you comment this line, this particular line, one
Okay.
line, input
This
value.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. Come to next one. Vendor number is equal to input value. Keep it. Maybe you okay. Just copy the input value. This is input value dot as value dot as code.
I can't do input value dot as value because it's a value. So
No, no,
this.
no. Value taken. Sorry, I mean my mistake. My bad. Value taken.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Value token.
Value token. Sorry. Dot as value
Okay.
braces and then again dot as token as date. Sorry, as code.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I never tested that. Thanks, man. That sounds cool. Yeah, that makes sense. That reduces my begin end, which I hate. In any case, okay. So let's apply the same rule here. Value
Yeah.
token dot as value
Input.
dot
Input.
as state. Nice. That looks nice. Great. Thank you. Okay. So should we move ahead at this point? Are there any questions, suggestions?
Just,
I'm also
just check
learning.
whether it's
Yeah.
working or not. I think it should work, but
We'll see that, yeah, as next step. If it doesn't work, we'll change that. I'm pretty sure it should work. And this, yeah, because that converts it as it is. Okay. So let's assume that this will create our purchase order, or it's creating our purchase order. Why do I assume? So once my purchase order is created, then I can go ahead and start creating my purchase lines. But I cannot have purchase lines if my header is not created. So I should actually do a kind of reference check at this point that it is actually created or not. So I'll have a boolean return from this function. And if all this happens, then I'll call my exit true. Or you can do different style. You can do purchase header dot empty and things like that. And just to make it simple, I'm just doing an exit true, assuming that this all executed and purchase order is created. So if my purchase order is created, then I'm going to create my purchase lines. And I might have missed something else. What I did. Okay. Get purchase line details, and we'll again do it based on this.
Hi, Saurav.
Hello, Manish. We are discussing your topic where you are.
Yeah, I missed the beginning part actually.
Not a problem.
So I'll just need a quick review about the value token. So here
We'll
what
be
I
going
understood,
there.
yeah, from here what I understood that order object, that's basically a JSON object. And another parameter over here is purchase header. That's understood. But we are getting it field wise, order date, buy from vendor number. But what is value token over here?
So your value token is like, so it is just a name given, but it's a JSON token to
Okay.
kind of fetch the value that is coming against this. It's a name value combination, like. So the name of this field is order date. The
Mm,
value of order date is this, right?
okay.
Okay. So when I come back to the code here, and at this point, when I'm saying read the object, and at this point, if you have seen all this, and I don't know you were there or not, so what we did is we first check that is my parent node is called orders or not, which is it orders or not?
Mm-hmm.
If it is orders, that means that there can be one or multiple orders,
Okay.
right? So what I did is I kind of did a repeat until to kind of fetch each order one at a time.
Okay.
Then this order object, and this is orders object, and this is order object. That means this one have multiple orders, and this one has one order.
So order object is nothing but a JSON object, right?
Yes, everything is a JSON object at
Okay.
this point,
Okay. Hmm.
right? So once I get the order object, which is the part of the array, that means I'm right now only targeting at this particular order.
Okay.
This is my whole order object, right? Curly braces from here till this point is my order object,
Correct. Hmm.
right? Once I have my order object, then I'm saying that read that order object and put it into my purchase header. So
Okay.
once I'm in my order, a particular order, then I'll get these two value pair combination as per what my structure is. You can have a different structure, it's up to you, of 5 fields or 10 fields.
Right. Right.
Once I'm here, I know that I should get an order date and I need the value of that order date. So if you read this get statement, the result actually gets fetched into a JSON token.
So to get the value of each field, we have to define variable against each field,
No,
because
no.
over
So
here
if you
order date,
see,
vendor number.
order date and vendor number, it depends on you. Like, I didn't want it to muddy this area, as in I could have done that validate by to vendor number from, let's say, this line, right?
Okay.
And then if another line. So I didn't want it to muddy this area where my actual insert is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you can either do it like this, or you might want to do that here. It's up to you.
Okay. Okay. Understood.
You don't need to have variable, it's not mandatory, as in you can replace this vendor number with this, adding a condition like this.
Okay.
So you can kind of remove this variable, it's up to you.
Okay. Understood.
So once I have read till this point by from vendor number, my header was created, and now I'm looking into my lines. Now if you look at the lines, they are actually a array. The lines is an array because again it can have one or more lines. So we'll follow this kind of similar thing what we did on purchase header detail, this time on my purchase line detail, so that we can insert our lines. So let's create this procedure again. Okay, we have this here. Okay, so now what I will do the same thing. I have this order object. Now what I'm expecting after reading by from vendor number is a array of type of with the key value of lines, key of lines. So what I'll do is I'll follow the same style as we did last time, which is my order object. If it contains what it contains, my key, then I need to go forward, otherwise there's no point. Now, if it contains that, then I should be able to put that into an array because I know that my lines is an array. So I can do my order object dot get of my lines into an array. So let's add an array as in JSON token. I can call it as line token array. Token. So the what get will do is if it finds lines, it will kind of put that whole structure of that into this array, which is again a JSON token. It contains line, so that kind of verifies that I'll not have an issue here. Once I get this, I'll follow the same thing. What we did here is that we will, let me collapse this so that we can go up. Yes. So once as I got orders, I got lines here. If I find that, then we'll again do the for each because there can be multiple lines. What I'll do is I'll need to have a line token, which is available in my line token array. So let's create a line token. Which is my JSON token. So once I have my line token, which is one specific line, then I need to fetch that line into an object, as we did last time again. So I'll create my line object of type JSON object. So then I can fetch my line object from my line token dot as object. At this point, my line object actually contain a line, which is this. This object is stored in my line object variable. And we will follow the same practice as we did last time with a kind of a twist or a easy step that was told us. And that's it here. So what we'll do is we will kind of follow the same set here, which is something like this. Okay. Now I need to fetch, let's create those variables first. I need to fetch the item number quantity from my lines. So I'll do my item number as of type code 20 and line quantity as my decimal. So now inside the lines, I can find what? I can find the number, and I don't want to miss the sequence. So sorry, the case sensitive part. So I'm doing that, and then I can do it as item number, and item number is of type as code. Okay. And then I need to get my another value, which
Please
is,
change that line object also. If or you have order object, please change that to line object.
oh, sorry,
You
yeah,
forget.
thank you. That's the sad part while you copy paste things. Okay. Now, the another thing that we are trying to fetch is the quantity. Okay. So let's do that here. Quantity, that becomes my line quantity and of type decimal. Okay. Once I have this, I can be happy enough to create my purchase line, which is not defined here. So let me do my purchase line of type record line. Okay. So I should have somewhere it on my notepad. Let me fetch that code directly so that we save some time here. Okay. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm initializing the purchase line, setting up based on document type based on the header that is being passed here. Number from the header, line number. There's a function that I need to create, inserting that type. I'm assuming it's all item, number from my item number, and quantity from my line quantity, and then do a modify. So just to create this function so that we can test it, called guest next purchase order. I should have a snippet. The open discussion. Okay. So this is nothing. It's just a function which gets the next, the last line number in that purchase order, and then use that line number while creating the purchase line. So let's quickly test it as we are running out of time. And if anybody would like to wait, then I'll complete the last part of adding that comment into it. Okay. It's published to server. I'm just waiting for the pop-up, I guess. Okay, hope that happened. Okay. So our last number that we can see is 009. Let's try to upload the same JSON again. It should create two new orders. And it created two with some amounts. That means there should be lines at this point. So if you see that there are three lines in this of 1900, 1908, and 196. So if I zoom this in, 1900 S, 1986, 1906 with 20, 20, and 8 quantity. So let's verify that 2028. And then the same is in the case of the other order. So this is kind of the two level that we talked about till now. The last thing is that we wanted to add the comments into our import module. So while we do a multi-level, we might need to look at our JSON file again. So when you look at this, you actually see that the comments are residing under the lines array. So lines is an array, and inside that there's a comment array. So I can't actually put them under orders wherever I was creating my purchase order and then I put lines. I'll have to kind of call that function to insert comments inside my line loop. So I need to identify that while I'm reading my line object, do I get something called as comment? Because I can or I may not. I may or may not. In this case, I have comments. In this particular case, I don't have any comments. So I'll have to kind of check that if I get a comment array inside my line that I'm currently reading, then I need to insert those comments. Otherwise, I'm happy there. So at this point, while we were doing that, if the line object gets the number, then do this. If it gets a quantity, then do this, and then do this. But what if, at this point, my line object gets me a comment? So I need to have a kind of a function to handle that. And as in, if you don't want to handle comments, it'll work fine. That's okay. But I can always, instead of writing that whole code into this section, I can also check that if this contains my keyword is comment. If it contains that key, then add my line comments, which is, let's say, insert line comments from my line object, which is this object, and with a reference of purchase line, because I'll have to kind of set those links between the purchase line and the comment line. So if the line object contains a comment, and only if it contains that, then and only then this line comment should be called so that the line can be inserted. Okay, coming back here, and we'll have to follow the same practices, and the reason being super simple because it also follows the same structure. Inside a comment array, which is this array, there can be one or more object, and each object will contain a comment and a date. So we will follow the same thing that we did last time, which is at this point, if my line object contains, which I already done more or less, but just to kind of double check it, this point contains comment, then you begin, and then what you do, as we did last time, if my line comment, line object gets a comment into a array again, which is a JSON token, which is line comment array, JSON token. So if it gets that comment, then I'll fetch one by one as we did last time. Then for each line comment token, because it's an array, you need to fetch one comment from that. I can define that as my JSON token in my, for each token in the token array, will again fetch that comment array into, comment object into a object again. So you can say line comment object, a JSON object, and I can do my line comment object initialized from my line comment token as object. So now I have that kind of to my comment into my line comment, and we'll follow the same as we did last time, which is we will copy my two variables that we have here, which is value token, and I might want to create them as global maybe. Okay, and I'll copy this also, I can use that. Okay. So at this point, what I want to do is I have to fetch two values, which is my comment and date. So I'll say line comment of type text, I guess it is 80, and then comment date. Okay, so at this point, I need to fetch it from my line comment object, and I need to get the comment. And don't worry, these are not two repeating words. One is in value pair and one is an array. So system will be able to kind of distinguish between those two different JSON type objects. Now this gets converted as text. And let's follow this and do my date. comment date coming from this as okay. So now I have both the variables that I need. I will need a comment line okay. Kind of do my init insert, and to save time because we are already past there, I'll just again copy this from my notepad. Just initializing my comment line, setting the document type based on purchase line and document number, and then the line number from a function, and then passing the comment to from line comment, and the comment date remain comment date, and it comments it. Okay. I just need to create this function. Let me do tbc open discussion. I would have created this somewhere. Yes. So this code is kind of this function, which returns the last comment line for that particular purchase line. So at this point, when we run this, this will create the purchase order. Then we'll add the purchase lines into that order. And then for each line where there is a comment, it will also add those comments into the purchase lines. So let's quickly do an upload, select a file, and we got two orders. Let's go. We have lines, and let's see, do we have comments here? And we do have comment 1 and comment 2. Whereas on the second line, we have no comments, and whereas on the third line, we have two comments. So in this way, if you see here, this will actually match what we had, which is, this was not the order that we were looking at. We were looking at this. The second line had no comment. The first line has two comments, and the third line had again two comments. So this exactly matches to what the input file was, and you can actually read it from different ways. I just wanted to kind of do it from a physical file because that's what I guess Manish wanted to kind of import it. But you might get it as a output from a website, and where you can read it to a stream and then directly do that insert into your business center. So I guess that was all for today. Anybody has any questions? I'm ready to wait if there are any other questions around this.
Sort of, Manisha.
Yeah,
Sort of this import is basically for multiple orders. So
right.
what if we receive a single order? In that case, there won't be a keyword for the header orders. So how can we handle
There,
that?
so there will be, as in, so understand it from this perspective is let's go back to Business Central. So what we did last time is kind of while we were doing our export, right? Is we build that export assuming that we have only one order,
Right.
right? So if I take this at this point and put it on my JSON beautifier, if you zoom this, at this point, you don't need to have that because the first thing that you will look for is when you get this, the whole object into it, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing you'll start doing is you'll start reading these info instead
Okay.
of
There's no
looping in.
need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there is no array before this,
Right. Right. There's no
right?
array.
Yeah, so you'll start reading these directly. Once you reach to this point, then you will look for a line array.
Right.
So
Okay.
everything will remain same. It's just that I just added one more node into it to
Mm-hmm.
kind of make it simple if you have multiple orders. But the way your structure is, you can change your code based on that.
Okay, understood.
Okay, and I'll make sure it gets into it. I just renamed that repo. Now it's called JSON import export. The code will be available here, so you can kind of use that for your references if required.
Sure.
Okay, anyone else have any questions? And other than this, also will work. It's not mandatory to have questions around this.
So, Saurav, I have a question related to uh, the file import and export because now in Business Central we can access our application from outside of the network. So suppose we are using the internet, we are accessing the application. So now we have to, somebody has to import and export the file. So
Mm-hmm.
because now we are not on the network, or how that would going to be working? Either we have to use SharePoint to do that, or how it is going to be working on that.
Is it related to import or
Yeah,
export?
import or import, you can say that basically import, or maybe export also, because I don't know whether it is possible to export when you are accessing application via internet. Because
So,
somewhere it has been stored. If it is stored in the local drive, then I don't think where we can able to export also, because you are accessing the outside of the world, outside of your local network.
so it depends. It actually doesn't matter from where you are doing it. It actually depends on what type of client you are using.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for Business Central, you only have the web client or the modern
Yes.
client on your Explorer, right?
Yeah.
And your modern client follows the rule of the browser. So
Okay.
if you are on Facebook or on Twitter or on anywhere else, if
Mm-hmm.
you download a file on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
it goes to a specific folder called downloads.
Correct.
So when you access Business Central on your phone using a web browser, either it's Google Chrome or any other
Mm-hmm.
browser, it
Mm-hmm.
will also download the file in your phone in the same place where other downloads are placed.
Okay.
Okay, so it's as in I'm using Business Central on my laptop. So even
Mm-hmm.
if you saw while I was downloading a file, like when I did this,
Mm-hmm.
the process download JSON, it doesn't ask me where I need to save it. It actually
Mm-hmm.
downloaded it into my downloads folder.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter either you are accessing from phone or from your laptop. It just follows the rules of the environment where it is hosted, which in this case is Explorer.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, when you try to upload a file in any web browser
Mm-hmm.
application, either it's Facebook or somewhere, it pops up from where you want to pick the file,
Okay.
which is your system. It's a
Mm-hmm.
phone, it's a laptop,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a mobile, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way, the upload will work. When I'll let's say if I go to my customer or vendor, and if I try to import a picture,
Mm-hmm.
it will not show me the server path. It will show me my machine, which is there's this simply yes, and it'll say select a picture to upload. When I say choose, it will redirect me to a folder which I last accessed, whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is, right?
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's unrelated to nav or business center. It's actually related to where you are consuming that application, which now is the browser. So
Mm-hmm.
it will behave like a browser application.
No, if we need to have somebody in, suppose if we need to store the file somewhere, then how it is going, because we have to specify like central location kind of thing if you're not going to access from your local network.
Yeah, so in that case, there are different ways, as in you can
Mm-hmm.
use attachments here, as you can see here, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when this gets stored inside the database. When you do
Okay.
when I select a file here and
Mm-hmm.
choose a file here, it will be stored inside the database. The other
Okay.
way around is that maybe you can add a record link. There should be somewhere called as record links where you can give a URL. Now, for URL, you need a SharePoint Online, a
Mm-hmm.
OneDrive, whatever you can use, whatever
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to you, and use that URL to kind of save your records.
Okay. For in that case, the share if we are using the SharePoint, then maybe it's a customer environment, and customer has to buy the SharePoint license, or how it is going to be?
Yes, they'll have to.
Okay.
That's how it is, doesn't it? So like this is the links area, right? That let me do that best. So if I create a link, which in the previous versions of Dynamics Nav used to be a local file, now you actually need to give it a URL. Now the URL will either come from SharePoint Online or from OneDrive or from a website. Like if I want to refer it to my blog, I can just do this and it will store it as a link that then can be used by users in the system to kind of access that link. You know, they can, I might have to restart the tenant, but yeah, here it is. So I can click here and navigate there. But that should be if it's a URL that can be accessed. I can't put like D drive my file.
Yeah, that's true, because previously we can do that.
Now it doesn't understand it. It'll save it,
Yeah.
but you can't do anything out of it. Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
No, Saurav.
Okay. Okay, thank you guys. If there is anything, just drop me an email. I'll try to cover that next week. And it may not be next week. I'm not sure yet. I have a go live coming up. So if things goes okay, we might I might send you an invite on Friday. Otherwise, next week is for sure. But I'll try to attend next week if possible. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, then
Good
thank
night.
you, Saurabh. Thanks. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Saurav.
Thanks, sir.